Today I'm talking with Tripp Friedler, author of The Tunnel, about his son, Henry, who was battling bipolar and eventually took his own life. We'll explore how this condition ripples through the entire family, is shaped by society, from education to law enforcement to social stigma, and the challenges for everyone involved. But amidst the darkness, there are messages of hope, kindness, and just doing the best you can. Let's push through and find the light at the end of the tunnel with Tripp Friedler. So your book, The Tunnel, takes us through the story of your family with your son, Henry, who had bipolar disorder. And this book highlights the impacts that this disease has on so many people, on the family, the father, the mother, the siblings, the impacts from society. It shows us what's going on from all these different angles. So let's start with you, the father of Henry, this boy with bipolar disorder. There's a lot of hard things about it. There's a lot of challenges, a lot of pain, a lot of growth, but what was the hardest thing about it for you?
Actually, the hardest thing for me, or the thing I had the most difficult time dealing with, was lack of control. The fact that I'm used to being in control. I'm used to having some level of control over my situation, and I had no level of control over this. And so that was probably actually the hardest thing to deal with, the fact that I couldn't control anything. I mean, it was beyond my control. So coming to grips with that took a while.
Yeah. And that mindset of control and being able to fix things and use your problem solving skills that have helped you in like most areas of your life and helped you succeed in your career and helped you with your brother back in the day when he had an addiction problem. It kind of worked back then. It seems to be working, this problem solving and fixing and control mindset. But this time it's like you can throw all the money at it. You threw so much money into it even. And
Yeah. I mean, we have a saying in my family, that if you have the money for the solution, you don't have a problem. You don't necessarily want to spend it, but that's on you, right? So if you have the money for the solution, you don't have a problem. But this is one where it doesn't matter how much money you have, it didn't help. And, as you said, we threw a fair amount of money at the situation. My heart really goes out to people who can't do that, who don't have the resources. But even with those resources, as you know, reading the book, I mean, it's one crazy story after the next. It just wasn't helpful.
yeah. And it must have also been hard because with bipolar disorder, things sometimes get better and actually sometimes things get great. So then you could be like, oh, it's not bipolar disorder, or the problem solved. We fixed it. Yes. So it's like this bipolar, this up and down within the family and within the individual of hope and despair and things being great and things just crashing right back down again. For Henry, but then for you too. So yeah, I don't know how you went through that roller coaster of hope and despair.
Well, it's interesting in the book. There's a scene where we're on a family vacation, and my daughters are on a roller coaster, literally. And this is in Copenhagen. And they said, "Dad, why don't you ride with us?" And I felt like I don't need to be on a roller coaster. I'm on a life roller coaster. And it's an apt description. It really does feel like a roller coaster because, it's just up and down, up and down, up and down. And it's, it's no fun for anyone. It's no fun for the siblings. It's no fun for the parents. And I especially believe it's no fun for the person who's experiencing the bipolar disorder. Can't be fun for them either. So clearly the downs are not fun. The manic episodes, I don't know, seemed like he was having a pretty good time.
Right. Yeah, and I have an older brother with bipolar disorder, and so I've seen that, and I don't want to turn the story into our family story, but I saw that's why the story hit me so hard because I saw myself in a lot of this. I saw my family and all of this, and like everything that he was doing, I was like, oh yeah, I've seen that.
So, not to turn it into your family story, but I am curious, did your brother have psychotic episodes like Henry?
Uh, he went past mania into psychosis sometimes, and he was it was scary because I'm sort of the Kate in the story. I'm 15 months younger than him.
Oh wow.
I never give up. I never give up on him. I'm always his supporter. And even when he sees my dad as the devil and evil and stuff and whatever, and I'm like, Dad, come on, Dad. And now my dad eventually kicked him out, and he's homeless. He's been homeless for the past couple of
That's a
years.
shame.
But that's also something that you talked about in the story is this is also a common thing that happens. But yeah, back to the point though. Yeah, there were some points where he was in psychosis and he was scary.
Yeah. And the only way we found to get Henry out of psychosis was a hospitalization, because he never came out voluntarily, so to speak. I don't know what would have happened if I just let him go. But what I've learned from talking to doctors is that when you go through psychosis, it's a little bit like being in a car accident, right? I mean, your brain gets whacked around, and that kind of damage to the brain, if it happens over and over and over and over and over again, it can be permanent, which is a shame.
Yeah.
But there are people out there. There's one in New Orleans I talk about in the book called EPIC, Early Psychosis Intervention Clinic, that tries to get these kids at a relatively young age in their first or second bout with psychosis, because they've found if they can do that, the ability to get better goes way up.
And then you had to call the cops on him a few times, not like sending him to jail, but to use a 72-hour hold to put him in the hospital, because once someone's 18, you can't just make him go. You can't make him do anything really. And my dad had to do the same thing sometimes.
Right.
And then that's when you become the devil, the demon, the evil man.
Yes. I heard all those things. I mean, look, being a parent sometimes is doing hard things. I have a line in the book where I didn't feel like I was caught between a rock and a hard place. I feel like I was caught between a mountain and hell, because it's just a series of bad choices you have. And having to use law enforcement to solve a medical problem, to me, is how our society has gone totally off the rails. I just refuse to accept that there's not a better way of doing that. And so, it's just a horrible dilemma that our society has put us into.
Yeah.
To have to use law enforcement to solve a medical issue is not helpful. And I don't know about in your case, but in my case, when the police showed up, to not take him to jail, but to take him to the hospital, there were 4 police cars. It seemed a little overkill to me on someone who really wasn't dangerous, or at least I didn't perceive him to be dangerous. And he wasn't dangerous.
Yeah. Right. And then once people have bipolar disorder, if they don't have the support of the family or the finances or whatever, they might end up homeless. They might end up in this cycle between the streets and the jails and stuff, because there's nowhere for them to go.
Well, that is where they end up, right?
There's nowhere else to go. Where else do they go?
Nowhere else to go. There's no society, has deemed it unimportant, clearly, to take care of these people. If you have cancer, they'll take care of you. If you have heart conditions, they'll take care of you. But they just don't want to take care of you with mental conditions. And it's been a long, sad journey our society has taken to reach this point where you look out to many of these homeless people, and it's, they're suffering from schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective, just all these different diseases that as a society we don't seem to want to treat as diseases.
Yeah.
Which is a shame.
Yes, you saw deeply into the whole larger system of the criminal justice system there, the education system, the flaws in that, the pharmaceutical industry, healthcare, the hospitals, all of it. And so I kind of want to look at it from this perspective too, that the society's probably failing role in this, or its shortcomings. We'll get back to the criminal justice system and healthcare and stuff, but For me, reading your story, it sounds like a lot of this actually came down to the education system too. The lack of empathy they had. Um, they're trying to just, I don't know, whatever, max out their profits or whatever, that not caring about the actual education, or the maybe the education, but not the care and well being of the students. There were multiple times where Henry would he would break a rule, he'd break a little rule, but they would not be flexible, and they didn't realize how much damage that was doing to him. And it happened again and again and again, and they'd kick him out, which he lost. He lost so many things from each time that happened. He lost his community. He lost his identity. He lost hope. It's just like, oh my god, not again. And so it seems like a small thing, but
Yeah, it's not such a small thing, quite honestly. And education, it's a funny word, right? I mean, how we educate kids. I certainly tried my best in the book to not be bitter, right? To not blame, because there's always two sides to a story, and I can understand where an institution, whatever institution that may be, um, has to protect everybody in the institution, right? Having said that, especially in high schools, right? This notion of one strike you're out, or even two strikes you're out, seems very archaic and very cruel, because kids definitionally make mistakes. And for the inability of institutions to use those mistakes as the ability to learn and educate, seems sort of ironic that we call these institutions of education, but they don't seem to want to educate. They seem to want to only educate in the ways they want to educate. And so if you're not going to play by their rules, there's very little leeway for you to exist. And so, as you were saying, and they're really two different stories. He got kicked out of two schools, one in high school, one in college. One because he violated, some rules around marijuana, which I can totally understand, but it was a two-strike policy. And when he tried to fudge his drug test, they called that two strikes as opposed to one strike. Now, look, as I said in the book, I can, if you want to go that way, clearly you could argue that point, but you have to want to go that way to argue that point. And so, having a little empathy and having a little understanding and having a little compassion for people who are 15, 16 years old just seems like what educators should do. Right. And so I felt that was, he clearly violated the rule. I'm not arguing he didn't violate the rule. They clearly had the right to do what they did. I'm not arguing they didn't. What I'm saying is they really took away, it's really, for a kid getting kicked out of school, is capital punishment. That's the worst. And to do that when you don't have to do that seems mean. It just, to me, seems mean. And so, as the parent who had to live with the consequences of that defeat, it's rough. It's really rough. And, the second time was a different story where he was in a full blown manic episode. I understand why they had to do what they had to do. What I didn't understand was why they wouldn't let him back in when he got better. It'd be like saying, if you're sick and you have to go to the hospital, have cancer treatments, you're going to have to pull out of school. Everyone understands that. But the school would more than be happy to let you back in once your chemo is over. Whereas in this case, there was no coming back from that. So it's just, it's hard for me to understand. It's hard for me to wrap my head around it from my perspective.
yeah. And there were actually a few other instances too. You counted two, but there were a few other ones that were still were quite significant. When he went back to his original high school, they wouldn't let him play soccer. He was still in the school, but this is a rule. You're a fifth year now, so you can't play soccer. And
That was not a school rule. That was we're from Louisiana. That was what's called LHSAA, Louisiana High School Association rule.
okay,
And so, but to your point, Michael, it's all these societal rules, right? It's all these institutions meant to regulate, in this case, high schoolers, right? And we're so caught up in following every rule that we forget why we create them, right? And what's the point and what we're trying to do. And, education is about making a mistake and learning from it. And so to take that away seems like you're not really educating. And in the soccer example, I mean, the rule was set up to not, so you couldn't have schools going out and recruiting fifth year seniors, but that's not what this was about. And so, as I say in the book, rules are rules if you want to make them that way. You don't have to, right? But no one's really wanted any nuance at all. It's much easier to avoid nuance. It's much easier for the rule makers, much harder for the people who have to live with the rules that get handed down.
Yeah.
And that was unfortunate. That was really unfortunate. That one in particular. But the school actually tried to help in that case. The school tried to help. They just had no wiggle room from the association, from the rule police for the high school athletics. They were harsh.
And then I guess the later cases when he was an adult and he was working at these schools as a PE teacher or a coach, he would also get fired. But that wasn't really on the school. That makes sense because he did get involved with law enforcement. So maybe in this case, law enforcement was acting up a bit. But yeah, talk about your experiences. You did talk about how they showed up with 4 cop cars and they would, make him look like a criminal.
Right.
But yeah, any more thoughts on I don't want to turn this into like a let's blame the system, but we do need to look at the system.
No. And quite honestly, in writing the book, I tried my best not to blame the system. But let's face it, our system around mental health is poorly constructed, right? And so if you're going to rely on for instance, law enforcement, whose job it is to enforce laws, and we're going to say as a society, well, we don't have enough staffing and enough help to deal with mental health problems, so let's put that on our law enforcement as well. That's unfair to everybody, right? So and I hope it doesn't come across, and I don't think it does, but it's not so much a woe is me, or it's not so much shame on this, because everyone had a role in this. Biology, me, our institutions. A lot of people failed my son. I'm being one of them. But I think all of us are trying to do the best we can with what we got, including some of these institutions. But I will say, on the police side, there were times he's had run-ins where the police could have been a little more empathetic. Let's just leave it at that. I mean, but of course, I don't know what that particular policeman had going on that day. Maybe his kids were having problems. Maybe his spouse was having problems. Maybe he was having problems, but there was that ripple effect that created more problems.
Well, yeah. Well, it's like a same kind of thing going on within the Friedler family, right? It's like they're there trying to enforce the law and control things, and the Heidi's there trying to empathize, and the sister's there, and Henry's there, and so it's all like no one's a bad guy in this situation. It's hard when people are living together, and when it's like millions of people, it's even harder.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. You're 100% right. It is a microcosm. The Friedler family was sort of a microcosm of a broader society, of which I sort of, for lack of a better person, became sort of law enforcement. And you're a billion% right. There are no bad people, but there are no bad people. There's no buts about it. There are no bad people. There are bad systems, right? There are ways that we create in our society that create bad systems. And we have plenty of those. And, the police do the best they can. It's a hard job. It's not a job many people want. I empathize with them. And then we just throw more crap on them and we expect, good things to come from that. So I don't blame them, not individually, but society needs to step up and realize that mental health is just another form of healthcare. It's just a disease of the brain, not a disease of the person. And they should treat it the same way they treat cancer. We in the mental health community, they like to say that, if you get cancer, you get a casserole, right? People bring casseroles. People aren't bringing casseroles for bipolar disorder. They're not bringing casseroles for schizophrenia. They're not bringing casseroles for clinical depression. Um, they're staying away, right? And that is societal. The shame that comes with these kinds of diseases is a societal shame that should not exist.
Yeah, so that seems to be maybe the fundamental problem in all of this is this mindset towards mental health. And maybe if somehow culturally or educationally we could change that, then maybe all these systems might start improving. But I don't know.
Well, it's a heavy lift,
Yeah,
but it doesn't mean it's not worth trying, right? I mean, we've done a better job, quite honestly, thank God, with depression with kids, right? In high schools, and just letting people know what depression is, what it looks like, that there's help. And so, because suicide, as others have said, is a long-term solution to a short-term problem. And if you could just get through it and have someone to talk to, most of the time you'll come out on the other side. But if you feel like there's no one to talk to and society is judging you and you don't want to say anything, that can be a very dark hole from which you feel like there's no escape. And that is societal. But I think we've gotten better at that, at least on depression, talking about it. We have a long ways to go, but we've gotten better.
yeah. And speaking of depression, not only was Henry going through that from his teenage years onward, and then I guess it manifested into bipolar disorder, mania, and psychosis, but also your wife and his mother Heidi also she was quite depressed during this whole time and emotionally rattled, crying a lot, and she was quite affected by this in ways that you were affected too, but in kind of different ways. So maybe we could talk about this from his mother's perspective, from Heidi's perspective.
Yeah. I mean, she was, I don't want to be stereotypical. Having said that, moms, moms are different than dads,
Yeah,
not all of the time, but mostly, moms carried that child for 9 months. Mom actually gave birth to that child. I think moms have a deeper connection to children, most moms, not all moms, than dads. Heidi clearly was light years more empathetic about everything, than I was. And so she was just, it just affected her more. And, you know, depression is a horrible thing. Depression's a real thing, and depression's a real disease. And so I think, Heidi can get down. I mean, clearly what we went through would bring most people down. And so a lot of it is understandable. And then having a husband like me who's hard charger, problem fixer, nothing can, Superman sort of, doesn't make that job any easier. So you could see where Heidi would oftentimes feel very alone. I refused to be part of her solutions, really stupidly, quite honestly. It's a tough lesson for a dad to learn. I wish I didn't have to learn it the way I learned it. The good news is I eventually learned it and came around, but I was no help to her. I was no help. I was the opposite of help, which is ironic because I thought I was doing what I was, what I'm trained to do. I was doing what I'm trained to do, but I thought I was helping, and I wasn't. I was the opposite of help.
yeah, and then you were getting yelled at and not appreciated for all the hard work you were doing. But
Yeah.
but in the end, like you said, she now looking at the whole story, zooming out, you're like, oh, maybe she was right, and maybe this is a lesson for people talking to know who are friends with or parents of siblings of someone with bipolar disorder is yeah the way you communicate the way you the way you talk to them really has a big impact. They're already usually quite socially isolated or feeling rejected and feeling not enough and feeling invisible, not seen or whatever. It might not look like that. They might look like, oh wait, how could that person not be? How could that person not be happy? They're tall, they're handsome, they're popular or whatever. But you talk to them, they're like no, they're already they don't need an extra little push or fight. But I'm kind of going on a ramble here. But yeah, maybe you could talk about the differences in your styles of communication and trying to change this problem or deal with this problem from your perspective, from what you were doing, and then versus what Heidi was doing. I guess it's sort of the logic problem solving approach versus the empathy, emotional, just being there and listening kind of
Right.
approach.
So it's interesting. The answer probably lies somewhere in between, quite honestly. Um, everyone talks, whether it's addiction, depression, bipolar, doesn't really matter. There's this notion that this concept of enabling, right? Are you just helping the patient, live in their world, right? And not get better. And so is enabling, are you enabling, right? And then there's this notion of what I refer to in the book as tough love, right? Which you hear all the time, mostly around addiction, but like your father, right? With your brother. They think they're doing tough love, right? I don't believe in that, quite honestly. I don't think there is such a thing as tough love. I think there's such a thing as exhaustion, where you just feel like there's nothing left for you to do, right? This is like, I give up. It's sort of, you can call it tough love. I'll call it, I give up. I got nothing left, right? I'm shot. And so you have to go, right? And, I think that guys like me probably get fed up quicker than people who are very empathetic, right? And very more in tune with the emotional world. So I think they hold on longer. Eventually, everyone will get tired because it's exhausting. And eventually, everyone's going to lack the reserves to keep going. It's just I don't care what it is, whether you're running a marathon or it doesn't really matter. Eventually, you hit a wall, and that's it. You can't go anymore. And Heidi eventually hit that wall. I probably hit it sooner. But for Heidi, Henry would have been out of the house sooner. Um, so I thank God every day that I had someone like Heidi, because that would not have been helpful to anybody. And it would have left me with a tremendous amount of guilt at the end of the day for having done such a uncaring thing. But I do not fault anybody who reaches the end of their rope and doesn't know what else to do. Right? I mean, it's like you just get so exacerbated by the problem, and you get so tired that you just don't know what else to do. And so I don't fault anyone going through this for anything, quite honestly, because I do believe that everyone's just trying to do the best they can. I just think everyone's trying to do the best they can. And some people have more bandwidth than others. Some people have more resources than others. Some people are more in tune than others. But everyone tries to do the best they can. I believe. I know we did.
No, the more I'm learning about bipolar disorder and I'm hearing these different stories such as yours, but also talking to my dad, I start to realize. Well, at first I was kind of blaming him. I wouldn't tell him that, but internally I was a bit angry at him for kicking my brother out. I'm like, you have this house, there's plenty of space, and you just kick him out. That's evil. Maybe Jason's right. Maybe you're evil. But then it started to make sense. Like, when did he do it? He did it right as my mom was dying, and that empathy stone was gone. And then now also that energy, it's like a resource thing. It's like, oh God, now I'm gonna have to do double shifts. I'm thinking. And then
Right.
he's also just I don't know. Death is a hard thing when your wife is dying, and then so I don't blame him anymore. But there was a point where I was like, how could you do this? But now it actually makes perfect sense from what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, everyone in life has crosses they have to bear, right? Everybody. No one gets through unscathed. I don't believe anyone gets through unscathed. I think some are harder than others, but no one escapes unscathed. And you look at the well of resources your dad had, and by resources, I'm not talking financial resources. I'm talking just stamina,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And you're having to deal with a wife who's dying, which is, I can't even, I literally can't imagine because my wife has not died. And so, it's something that's unimaginable. And yet at the same time as this person is, you're devoting a lot of energy to that thing. Now your son is sucking up even more, and you only have so much, right? And never once does anyone feel bad for dad.
no,
And I'm not saying you should. What I am saying is, walk a mile in those shoes and see what you would do. And again, your dad's just doing the best he can with what he has. Right. And then, events play out, and to some extent, decisions made become permanent, right? I mean, they become, you can't rewind. There's no replay. There's no redo. You can't like take a mulligan, so to speak. And so you're stuck with where you are, which is, you know, it's a shame. And as a society, we're so eager to find fault with others. It makes our lives explainable. But at the end of the day, I mean, look, there are evil people out there. I know there are evil people out there, but most people are not, right? And most people just are doing the best they can with what they have. And my therapist used to tell me, if you could imagine that your dad is 6 feet tall and he's standing in front of a wall, brick wall, solid brick wall, that's 8 feet tall, right? And he has you on his shoulders, and you're looking at this beautiful scene playing out over on the other side of the wall. And you look down to your dad and you say, how come you never told me about this? Well, he can't see it. The wall's 8 feet tall. He's only 6 feet tall. He can't see it. So how is he supposed to explain something to you that he can't see himself?
yeah,
And that you only can see it because you are on his shoulders. You have learned from him things that he was not able to learn from his parents.
yeah,
And I talk about that in the book, that as families, we pass down these things that have real repercussions, and we don't ever have empathy for people who could use it. Right.
yeah.
So I'm big into that.
And then on those same shoulders, in your case, there was also Kate and Patty. So they were also able to see over that wall in ways that maybe you or Heidi could not. In the same way that maybe I can see things about my brother and see things about society that maybe my dad cannot see, and that's fine. You can also see things differently. We all got our own little perspectives. But yeah, I was, because I sort of related more with Kate in the story, although she was not in there a lot. I felt worried for her, some sort of sadness for her, because if I imagine my brother uh, killing himself, that's when I started crying in the book. Is when it happened, because that's my fear. Like, not that, I don't think he's gonna do that, but him dying or him disappearing or something. So
Right.
more than my dad. I'm sorry, Dad, but more than my dad, more than my mom, more than anybody, that specific brother, because we're spirit twins, right? So if he's
Right.
gone, it's like a piece of you is gone. So yeah, maybe you could talk more about
Yeah.
how you think, maybe from talking to Kate or seeing Kate, his sister, who was, he didn't have a brother, unfortunately. He died
Yeah.
even earlier, but that would have changed things too, perhaps. But he had the sister, and yeah, maybe you can talk about it from her perspective as much as you can.
Yeah, no, she, they were 15 months apart, like you and your brother. Um, they really were the energy twins. I mean, those two, it's funny because they would be playing, quote unquote. And as mom and dad, it's dad, I'd turn around and go, you two knock that off. And they'd be like, hey, we're just having fun. And I'm like, you are, until it turns into something that's not fun, because that's inevitably how it goes. And she laughs about that now because she knows I was right. Um, but they were extremely close. And when everyone gave up on Henry, and I mean everyone, Kate never gave up on him, ever, 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 ever. And she would be exacerbated. I mean, she would get overwhelmed at times, but she never gave up on him, ever. And that death really, really hit Kate hard. And to this day, she won't read the book. She won't read the book. She has no idea what's in the book. I mean, she has some idea because I talked to her about it, but she, it's emotionally very difficult for Kate. She's still angry at people who abandoned him. She, she just, she's not, we have a great relationship, Kate and I. Talked to her this morning, twice, three times. Kate and I talk all the time. We, we have a really, really tight relationship, and she holds no grudges against mom and dad for what happened, because she knows we did everything we could. Um, I think she feels that some friends might have abandoned him, um, which is, which she has a tough time with. And I know she's lost friends over this, right? That she just feels either weren't there for him, or, judged him harshly. Um, or she got judged for always including him. It was really hard on Kate. And of course, as parents, and I write about this, I asked Kate to do things I shouldn't have asked her to do. Right. I put her in situations that no child should be put into, like cleaning out his apartment one time. Um, that's just wrong of me. Looking at it now, it's so obvious. But at the time, again, when you're exhausted and you need help, you'll turn to whoever's willing to help, even though you may be doing more harm than good. So, yeah, Kate's doing well now. She is doing well, really well, but she still gets very, very sad about Henry. Very sad.
He has another sister who played an even smaller role in the story. I guess because she's always away. I don't know. She wasn't really there. Patty.
Yeah, Patty, it's funny. One of my favorite scenes in the book I call The Girl and the Goat. When I pass out,
Yeah, the restaurant.
I pass out at The Girl and the Goat, the restaurant, the one with the hard reservation. It's a great It's a really, really great restaurant.
I looked it up. There's two branches apparently. I was like, one in Chicago and one somewhere else. But anyway.
Oh yeah, well, it's really a great restaurant. I went back the following year, but I'm in the restaurant with Patty, who's pretty much, she went off to college when, she's 3 years older than Henry. So she went off to college. She really didn't, experience Henry head on, so to speak. And, but, I'm up visiting her and I get a very disturbing phone call, and then I pass out in this restaurant with her. And watching your dad just pass out is a freaky thing. Not that I would know that, but that's what she tells me. And so, yeah, I mean, Patty just had a little baby, a little girl, our first grandchild, who she named Charlotte Henry George. Her last name's George now, but she put Henry in that middle name. She loved her brother. I mean, she loved her brother. There's no doubt she loved her brother. She just didn't, she just wasn't there, And so, but she can't read the book either, for many reasons. And she, she just feels probably a little guilty, that she wasn't around more. I mean, which is a ridiculous notion. She was off living her life, right? It's not like she ran away. She went away to college and never came home, which the vast majority of people do. And so it's nothing on her, but yet she feels bad, that she wasn't there more. And now, of course, it's too late. So yeah, I felt a little bad in writing the book that I wish I could have included more stories with Patty, but fact was she was gone, And the one story I did include, I love that story. I love that scene.
Yeah, no, I told myself I was gonna not turn this into my story, but this is how conversations go, right? It's kind of fun.
Yeah. We're having a conversation. It's everyone's story, right? It's everyone's story.
Yeah, it is, and that's why the book is so powerful because it's like everyone's story. Like I don't know who's gonna read this book in America at least and not see themselves or see someone they love as any of these characters. This is America.
Right.
Yeah, unfortunately. But yeah, my dad promised my mom before she died that he would like write this book about her cancer journey along with my youngest brother Ethan's cancer journey. He had cancer when he was I don't know 11 or 12 or something like that. But again, I'm the Patty in the story. I'm off in Japan. When he was a baby, I was off in university, so I'm not going to be in this book. If I'm in the book, I'll be in there for like one sentence because same deal.
Right. Right. Yeah, but it's not like you don't care. It's not like you weren't kept up.
Yeah.
It's not like you don't know what's going on, but you're just not, I mean, you're off living your life, which is the way it should be, right? It's the way it should be. And so I think that, we all have our own stories, and they all got stuff in them, right? But yeah, I mean, you won't be in that story, but you will be because you're the brother, but it's not like your day to day, right? It's not like you had to deal with all that stuff. I mean, I had a mom who died of cancer and I was gone for a lot of it, right? My sister, who's 5 years younger than me, has a totally different perspective on that whole thing. Totally different, right? But mine's no more right than hers. We just have it from different perspectives. And, I was just gone. I was off living my life. And I didn't have to deal with the day to day things that go on when you're dealing with cancer.
Yeah. Well, you also don't expect things to happen as early as they do. Like I knew my brother would eventually become homeless or something would happen, but I thought I would be financially there. I would be in my 50s or something, and I could take care of him. But I'm like, wow, I was what 35 at the time or something. Like, I can't do nothing. I didn't know my mom was gonna die at 60. Your mom died even earlier. She was what 46 or 47 or something.
46 years old. 46.
So yeah, but we blame ourselves sometimes. Like, oh, I should have been there or whatever. But how? No, you were doing the best you could. Again, you're doing the best you could.
I think we wear these glasses that look back, these judgmental glasses, right? That look backwards as if we had the knowledge back then that we have today. I mean, that's how we become the people we are, right? All the mistakes we make, all the things that happen to us. We're just a whole big mishmash of all our past experiences. And so you either learn from them and improve and be better, or they destroy you.
Yeah.
And so you get to choose, right? And choice seems easy to me. And that's why I wrote the book. And so I mean, if anyone gets anything from this book, the things I would like them to take away are you do the best you can with what you got, number one. And number two, you know, have compassion for people who are going through a rough spot. Just don't be so judgmental. Like, don't, I know it's hard. It's really hard. I did an interview we were talking, and the question was, what advice would you give people whose friends or relative, just friends or people they know are are suffering through real tragedy, right? And I said, learn how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. You just got to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And, when you want to talk about your brother, which you should all the time, maybe there are people around you who don't want to talk about it, not because they don't like you or not. It just makes them uncomfortable,
Yeah.
right? It makes them, they don't know how to fix it. So they get uncomfortable instead of just being able to sit there and be part of your pain, right? And just absorb it.
And most importantly, from the person with bipolar's perspective, you have to live with that 24/7. If you making, let's talk about this from Henry's perspective, because yeah, sure, certainly he made people uncomfortable, which pushed them away and isolated him, and among tons of other frustrations and challenges he had that I can't even imagine. But yeah, let's talk about this from the person with bipolar's perspective. How they must be feeling through all of this. Yeah, there's a highs, there's a mania, which feels great, but there's the depression, which feels bad. But amongst this whole time, you're kind of invisible.
Yeah, it's interesting. And again, I know you don't want to make this about you, but I enjoy having these conversations with people
Okay.
who understand. Um, a lot of times, and I don't care if it's addiction, I don't care what it is, right? A lot of times, the person who's experiencing it does not feel there's a problem there, right? They don't think they're sick.
Oh, right. My brother still will not accept that he's bipolar. And if he hears this episode, I fear he might like get angry at me or stop talking to me or something. But
Right. Right. And so it's sort of hard. It's sort of hard to deal with someone who won't accept reality, right? I'm sure you get incredibly frustrated. And the first step to recovery, if you're in the addiction world, is to admit you have a problem, right? But but, you know, no one that I know would say, well, I don't have cancer. I mean, it's just, they wouldn't say that. They'd be like, okay, how do I treat this thing? Right? We got to ask ourselves as a society, why do so many people refuse to admit they have a mental problem? And I think clearly some of it is the fact that the disease of the brain is telling you that you don't have a problem. But some of it is, I have to believe, some of it is we know how society is going to judge us and we don't want to be judged that way. So, I think that has to play into it. I think it has to play into it. And so, when you look at it from your brother's perspective or Henry's perspective, and ironically, Henry finally did admit he was bipolar. He had bipolar disorder. Henry had admitted it. And that's when he started getting better, but that's also when he shot himself. I mean, let's face it, man, it's not a good diagnosis, right? Schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, those are not great diagnoses. It's like someone telling you you have terminal cancer. It's not like that because it's not terminal. It doesn't have to be terminal. But the people who are successful in life with schizophrenia, with bipolar disorder, are the people who can absorb it and admit it. And I was somewhere yesterday. I'm a big tennis player, and I was at our tennis facility, and people were talking about my book. And there was a young person there, I don't know, 28, 29, I don't, young. And he was interested, and he kept asking a lot of questions, and I didn't know who he was. And finally, he introduced himself. He's one of the new pros. I'd been away a long time. And he's one of the new pros. And I said, oh, well, the book's about my son, Henry, who died. He had bipolar disorder. And this young man goes, well, I'm bipolar. And I'm like, wow. And for him to be able to admit that is probably why he landed a job as a teaching pro at our facility, right? In other words, I think when you open up about that, it's got to feel a little liberating. You know, you don't let the disease own you. You take some control over the disease. And so I'm a big believer that in order to really get better, you're going to have to, it's hard. It's really hard. It's super hard, but it's necessary, in my opinion. It's hard to function in society if you're not going to admit you have a problem. And if you look at your brother, right? And in moments of lucidity and clarity, and you would say to him, is this the way you wanted life to turn out? He would have to admit it wasn't, right? Now, he might blame a lot of other people. He might get mad at the system. He might disperse criticisms amongst a whole group of people and not take any personal responsibility, which, you know, he would not be the only, he would join Henry in that crowd. But at the end of the day, deep down, he knows something's off, right? He knows that his friends aren't acting the way he acts. He knows that he's not where he wanted to be in life. It's just I mean, I wouldn't know because it hasn't affected me in that way, but that's rough. You know, I mean, it's rough to have to take a personal look at your life and admit that it's not what you wanted it to be. And so I don't blame these people. I don't blame your brother. I don't blame Henry. I don't know what I would do in that situation. I'd like to believe that I would, own up and own it and conquer it. But I don't know. This hasn't happened to me yet.
Yeah, but yeah, it makes sense. And like you look at a lot of the even most successful people in the world, like a large percentage of them actually are bipolar, and not like most of them. I mean,
But still, Elon Musk, Kanye. I mean, Kanye, I think, has come out and said he's bipolar, right?
I think Ben Stiller is bipolar.
Right. But Ben has it under control, right? But, Britney Spears. The interesting thing about bipolar disorder is it tends to affect really smart people,
Right.
really smart, creative people, right? I don't know about your brother, but if you look, it's incredibly intelligent, incredibly creative people tend to experience this for whatever reason. I have no idea. I'm not a scientist, but in my walking through this world and dealing with things I've had to deal with, I've noticed that the most intelligent people, people who are affected by bipolar disorder tend to be very smart. Not everyone who's very smart has bipolar, but a lot of people who have bipolar tend to be very high IQ people.
But think about Henry back when he was before everything kind of fell apart. He was a top student, top athlete, so he was intelligent in every form of the word of intelligence, right? And then
Right. No, he was, and sweet above all else, sweet, like easily my sweetest kid. And, yeah, I mean, it's almost like, I mean, they're all great kids. I love all my kids. As I like to joke with them, I love all my kids. Someday I'll love one more than others, but I love all my kids. I just think Henry was the nicest of all my kids, the sweetest. He was just such a sweet kid. It's a shame. And he just took the way out he thought was best for everybody. I mean, he was wrong as it relates to his family, but he did what he thought in his mind was the right thing to do, which was,
yeah,
but
right. Because when you read this, that's what, like, you must have asked yourself this a million times, and I don't want to ask the question of why he did it, but when you read the story, pieces start to come together, and you even pointed one of them out earlier, is like in early 2020, he eventually admitted that he was bipolar. He started taking Abilify, things got better, and then that December 1st, he was gone. So there's that piece of like the identity piece of, oh, I've got bipolar, but then also, and I don't want to put myself in this story. It's like, I don't know anything about it, but but you wrote a powerful book and you wrote it quite lucidly. Um, there's that Thanksgiving vacation in Florida. Everyone was happy and it's like perfect story. And I imagine from his perspective, he must have seen that as like now that he's better, he can see things clearly and be like, oh my God, I'm this is what they could have been without me. This is what they could be without me. What a burden I am.
Right.
Maybe he didn't feel that, but some people might feel that, you know?
No. I think look, like I do think it's a fool's errand to put yourself in the head of someone who commits suicide.
I know. And I told myself I wasn't going to do this, but I did it.
No. It's just you can run yourself through a million iterations, and it's inevitably you're not going to be. It's not going to be. But I will say that when I deal with people who have taken their own lives, mostly depression, by the way, and I look at these situations. I was talking to my neighbor today whose son was 16 and jumped off a building and killed himself, right? Out of nowhere. And in my own head, and this is how this is so human, is that we all say, well, that's worse, right? Because at least Henry was fighting a horrible disease they didn't want to fight any, right? And so you could at least maybe understand that he, like you just said, that in moments of lucidity, he just realized that this is not what he wanted to do, right? This is not the fight he wanted to fight. This is not who he wanted to be. This is not what he wanted to put his family through. You could say all those things, right? And clearly, in Henry's case, he took his sister's car, not his mother's car. He shot himself well away from the house where none of us had to find him. There were there were things he did that were compassionate and could have been a lot worse, right? He could have done it in a meaner, more vindictive way, which he did. So having said all of those things and not putting myself in his shoes, because who knows, I still, so there was a part of me that that came away thinking, okay, I can understand this, right? I can at least wrap my head a little bit around it. But then you really start thinking and but but he could have fought this.
Yeah.
There's people, like you say, who live with this, who have children and spouses and lives, right? So he could have. It would have been hard. It would have been hard. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not an easy path. It's not. It's not. But it is a path, and I just wish he could have seen the path
Yeah.
because he clearly didn't. Right? He clearly did.
But even to like, how could he have seen the path though? Like, no one's showing you the path, that bright path with bipolar disorder. Usually, they're showing you like this is what it's gonna be, and da da da. Or you just don't know. You just don't know. You're like, I don't know. But like, if you realize, if you dig into the literature, like your wife was doing, she was reading about this. She knows a lot about it. She knows, the role of sleep, the medication. I don't know. It seems to be we kind of usually need it. But yeah, educating yourself on like, oh, actually, I could have good days and I could decrease my manic episodes. But when you're in the throes of mania or psychosis, I mean, it's really hard at that point. So how do you? I don't know. It's just really really tricky thing. Like you said, you threw all this money at it, and it's just how do you?
It is tricky. It is tricky. I don't know the answer. If I knew the answer, maybe Henry would still be alive.
Even the professionals can't do it. You gave these guys like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and
No. I don't know the answer. What I will tell you is that it's possible. It's possible, but he didn't see it clearly, definitionally almost. He didn't see it that way. Right. And so you're right. How do you get someone to see it that way? I don't, that's who knows, right? I mean, that's a question that no one seemed to be able to answer, whether it's depression or bipolar disorder or anything, right? That's never the solution. Should never be the solution. I mean, I've read plenty of books of people who are dying of Alzheimer's who, do have their death come early. That I understand. That I actually do understand. Or you're dying of cancer and you just don't want to go through this anymore because it's painful and it sucks. That I understand, right? But those are totally lucid people who can explain to you why they're doing what they're doing. I don't think that's true I think anyone who sat down with depression, or even for that matter, bipolar disorder, who could have a serious conversation with you about their disease and what they're doing, I don't think anybody would say, I understand. I think everyone would say, but you're not really looking at it right. Whereas if it's someone with terminal cancer or Alzheimer's, you would say, yeah, I get it. I don't think anyone would say that with someone with depression or bipolar disorder. You can fight it, right? You can get through it and come out the other side. It's not easy. You can't do it alone. It's going to require some medication, but you can do it. But I never had that conversation.
Yeah, I guess we should be finishing up this conversation, but I did want to ask about his first manic episode was after taking a psychedelic.
Yeah.
What was it? It was
Mescaline.
mescaline. And then his second episode too, it didn't say which psychedelic, but he went to Florida and took some kind of
Yeah.
hallucinogen, and that's when it sparked his second manic episode. So it starts to make me think what kind of role drugs play in this. He was smoking marijuana this whole time, which also seems to be sometimes a common thread, and we can't really say what happened, what caused all this, or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, it does seem clear that the psychedelics did play a role in this, which is kind of sad for me because I like them and I think they help a lot of people, and I don't want to be scared from them. But what should we think about these things now?
Well, I think I agree with you, by the way, on everything you just said, including the benefits of psychedelics. I think I think we, as society and as people, we want to be so sure of everything, right? We want causation and effect. Sometimes we're just not going to get that. And sometimes it's a combination of a lot of things, right? And did the psychedelics help? No, they did not help. But I can tell you, I I know a lot of people. I'm not saying I'm one of them, but I'm not saying I'm not, that have done a lot more than he did, right? So it's not any one thing. I think about it this way. Maybe there's some demons buried deep inside of us, right? All of us. Or some disease that's buried deep, deep inside that just never get out. And for some reason, the mescaline opened a window that maybe would not have been open but for the mescaline. Maybe it would have been. Again, a fool's errand, right? I mean, who cares?
No, same. It's the same thing. Like you were kind of blaming yourself for pushing him into playing tennis instead of soccer. And had he played soccer, he would have had a team, had community, and had acceptance. And maybe that's the case. And I think that is a big part of it too. Like his lack of community and
Right.
having a tribe, being accepted and seen. But then again, it might be the fool's errand again, just running around and saying, "Hey, it was this."
But does it really matter?
It doesn't really matter. But we're so curious. We're like, oh, I want to find this answer to the story, like, mystery. It's like, well, how selfish of me.
Right. I mean, sometimes it's just the journey. And again, I keep coming back to the thing I wish I could get across to everybody. We just do the best we can, right? And to sit here and try to figure out what went wrong and when it went wrong and how I could have fixed it, who cares? Like that ship sailed, right? I mean, I can't fix it. I can't do anything. I've learned. I have learned. I've grown. I've become a better person. I hope, but I can't fix this. It's unfixable. It's broken and will never be. No one's putting Humpty Dumpty back together again, right? And so the directions on how to do that are irrelevant because it ain't getting done. So yeah, I don't think any of those things helped. But I also don't think in isolation that this is not something. I think people who are bipolar, schizophrenia, suffer from any of those mental illnesses, even depression, that little gene is hiding in there. And what wakes it up, who knows, right? What wakes it up, who knows? And yeah, if we could figure out what woke it up and keep it from them, could I go back in time and do that? Would I do it? Yeah, I'd do it. But I mean, I don't have a time machine. And so there's a certain grace to be able to accept where you are and to be able to be happy with where you are and to be able to be compassionate and understanding and help others. And so, when I see a homeless person, which could very well be your brother, right? I try to look them all in the eye, right? They won't look, a lot of them don't want to look you in the eye. But I never run. I never get scared because I know, but for the grace of God, there goes Henry. I know that this isn't these people's choices. This is what's been put on them. And so I try to have a little compassion. I'm not scared of them. That's for sure. They don't want to hurt me, which isn't, look, if someone's running at me with a knife and glazed eyes, I'm going to run, right? I'm not an idiot, but these people are not violent people, mostly, right? I'm not talking about paranoid schizophrenics who think you're out to kill them, but certainly your brother who's bipolar, even in a psychotic state, was probably not violent. I know Henry was.
I haven't seen him do anything. I mean, we went on a vacation one time to Hawaii. It seems like vacation seems to awaken the beast. And yeah, he was scratching, clawing, and choking me and stuff. But I mean, we were quite drunk too because I mean, he did like his alcohol, and that's the last time I actually
Right.
saw him. So I'm a bit sad that he's in sort of this crazy vacation mode. But yeah,
Yeah, but two brothers at 15 months apart, I'm sure that was not your only.
exactly. Exactly. We were always doing that. I wasn't blame it on the alcohol or the bipolar. It's like two brothers who are too close who love each other too much. So you're gonna fight.
Yeah, no. Y'all were easy victims of each other. I mean, 15 months apart. God, my brother and I fought all the time, and we were 2.5 years apart. So I can't imagine 15 months.
Yeah, and Henry punched you in the face once, but then you're like,
Yeah.
oh, it made sense. It made sense, and he regretted it immediately.
Well, that was the beginning of his getting better. I'm convinced. It's the only time he went into hospital and didn't want to come out.
He saw, oh my God, look what I've done.
It's like, this isn't me. I'm not this person. And so that was it was funny because when the police showed up to try to find him, they go, is he violent? I'm like, no, he's not violent. They go, well, how do you explain that? And I'm like, well, I'm his dad, and there are a lot of other issues going on. There were a lot of issues going on. He would never hit anyone else, but I'm his dad. So I represented a lot of bad things. And I think he just, in a state of psychosis, just took it out on me. And so, but he would, and he didn't get violent, and the police did find him, and he went voluntarily without a fight. So he knew, he knew, he knew it was time. And so and I believe that was the beginning of, I know that was the beginning of his recovery, but at the end of the day, here we are. All right.
Yeah, certain the punch worked, the Abilify worked, but did it? Here we are.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Did it.
But now with this book, I mean, I highly recommend this book. I read a lot of these books, and then I do interview the guests, and they're good books. Some of them are great, but this one is a must read. And you read the Audible too, so if people like audiobooks, yeah,
Right.
your sweet voice is in there, and it's not so it becomes sweet. I think your voice became sweeter after this whole incident because it sounds like you're kind of an angrier, kind of more stricter person back in the day. Maybe you are, but you in it the way you write, it seems you seem to have a lot of self understanding and self compassion at this point.
Yeah. Well, that's the beauty of everything I've been through. Right. I mean, you gotta, I wish I didn't have to have gone, I wish I had not had to have gone through it. But if you can't learn from it, I mean, geez, right? It's just, everyone goes, it's interesting. Everyone, the feedback you get is how brave you are and how, for putting this out there. And I'm thinking, brave? Like, what's the alternative? Not putting it out there? Like, hiding from it? What does that say about Henry? Right. And so I don't consider myself brave. Heidi has a great line where she goes, that's just the shame talking, right? If it was a story about cancer, are you brave for putting it out there? But when it's mental illness, woo. And so I don't consider myself brave, but I will tell you that it becomes a little bit of a lighthouse for others who can find at least somebody who will understand them and talk to them and help them go through a world that is totally foreign to them and totally unhelpful. So to that extent, I don't consider myself brave, but I am privileged to be able to have my story out there so others can reach out and maybe I can help. Maybe I can.
And you're donating all the money from this book to various mental health organizations. What are some of these organizations, and where is this money going?
Yeah, so 100%. I'm not keeping a penny, including printing costs and PR costs and every cost. Right now, it's going to basically, I know 3, perhaps 4 causes. One is Epic NOLA, Calm is their advocacy program. It's the one that Henry got involved with. It's Early Psychosis Intervention Clinic. It's a great program with great people. The other is NAMI, National Association of Mental Illness, another great program that was very helpful to Heidi. Another is in New Orleans, it's the Jewish Family Services, but it's a suicide prevention hotline, which they do God's work. And then I ran across an organization in Chicago, which I'm intrigued with and I'm going to learn more about, called the Depression Bipolar Support Association, where they set up sort of support groups around the country for parents or siblings of people who are going through this to be able to talk about the stories that we all have in an environment that's safe. And so that's another great cause. And, my hope is that the book really takes off and we can raise some real money, right? But even if I don't, I'm going to sell out the first little batch and raise some decent money for those groups. But even if it never goes anywhere and we don't really raise money, what I have found is we've raised awareness. And for someone, there aren't many men writing these stories, number one. And number two, there aren't many, I would call myself semi-successful. There aren't many guys who have achieved what I've achieved in business writing these stories. And we're the worst, right? We're the guys who need to read these stories because we're the guys who think we got it all under control, right? I mean, we're the ones who need it more than anyone. And so I'm hoping to raise a bunch of money, but more importantly, I'm hoping to speak and talk and give people a window so they can put some light into their situation and have some resources, know where they can go to get some help. Because there are places, and as you said, it's extremely important to find your community. And they exist. They're out there. They're just sometimes hard to find.
Yeah. And let's not get ahead of ourselves, but maybe you should also talk to your buddies in Hollywood. I think this would make a fantastic movie, a hard one to watch, but dude, oh my God, this would be a movie. Really, a really hard one to watch. Reading is hard enough, but yeah.
Right. But at the end of the day, it is hard, right? But life's hard. At the end of the day, I hope people come away with the message that life goes on and that there is a light, which is why I called the book what I did. There is a light at the end of the tunnel and we can get through it, and we're better off when we come out the backside of it.
Yeah.
So, there are people who have been through worse than me. So I hope people take that away from it as well. But while you're going through it, it's a little rough. It's not a beach read.
No. That's not a beach read. Maybe a night beach read, in the middle of a thunderstorm, a hurricane beach read, perhaps.
It's not a beach read, but it's a necessary book. So
yeah,
everyone should read it. I don't know if they will.
Yeah, but like you said, get comfortable with the discomfort. Try to accept reality, what it is, and then just do the best you can. Well, this is I really love this conversation. I was debating last night whether I should bring myself into this or how serious I should get, but I'm glad it went the way it did. Yeah, that was, I think, definitely, like I said, the first time I cried reading a book. Men don't tend to cry, but and then definitely the first time I cried preparing for an episode. Like, what you're preparing for an episode, writing little memos and notes and like what we're gonna talk about, and you start, what are you doing, buddy? But like that, but like you said, like I'm in the middle of a different story, but overlapping condition of bipolar disorder. So yeah, and I'm wondering how this story is going to turn out. And but the story keeps going on, and like you said, your daughter got married shortly after. Now there's a baby. There's all kinds of light at the end of the tunnel. So we just gotta do the best we can.
Exactly. Exactly. You just gotta go find it.
If people want to get the book, I guess Amazon's the best place. The books can be found everywhere. I said Barnes and Noble. It's everywhere, I guess.
The book's everywhere. It's everywhere. If they could go to their local bookstore, they can get it. It's everywhere. I mean, I'm not saying their local bookstore is going to have it, but it can be ordered. And I'm a big supporter of indie bookstores, so I'd rather them go to some indie bookstore. But it's anywhere. It's being distributed by a major distributor. But they can also go to my website, which is trippfriedler.com, which is the author's website, and they can learn more about the book. There's a video trailer, a bunch of interviews I've done. This will eventually get put on it. It's just to learn more about my story and Henry's story. So, but they can go to any bookstore. They can order it from Amazon though.
Well, thank you, Tripp. I never know how to say goodbye, but maybe that's just how it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for listening to the book. Thanks for being out there. I appreciate it.